Welcome, story lovers. We are about to open a new book and travel to the glamorous and dangerous 1920s. To ensure you have a reserved seat for every chapter of our next great adventure, please subscribe to the channel and like this video. And now, our story begins. The chandelier in the grand ballroom of the Covington estate cast a light that was, for the first time in a generation, a liar. It glittered upon crystal glasses and shimmering silk dresses, pretending a wealth that was now a hollowed-out phantom. The year was 1928, and the fortunes of the old New York aristocracy, built on shipping and land, were beginning to crumble under the relentless assault of a new, more aggressive era of Wall Street speculation. No family had crumbled more spectacularly or more secretly than the Covingtons. From the shadowed alcove of the ballroom, Genevieve Hayes watched her father, a man whose charm had always been his greatest asset and his most profound failing, work the room with the desperate, practiced ease of a born showman. He was a magnificent ruin, still draped in the trappings of a king, even as his kingdom was being repossessed. The party, a lavish affair intended to celebrate his 60th birthday, was, in truth, a final, desperate gamble, a performance to reassure their creditors and the city's gossips that all was well. It was not well. Genevieve, at 23, was the family's unwilling bookkeeper, the quiet, intelligent daughter who knew the terrible truth of their ledgers. They were bankrupt. The creditors were no longer making polite inquiries. They were circling, their patience worn thin, their threats of public ruin growing louder with each passing day. She had spent her life in a gilded cage, a world of debutante balls and polite, meaningless conversations. Now, the bars of that cage were about to dissolve, leaving her and her family exposed to a world they were utterly unprepared for. Her father approached her, his usual jovial mask slipping to reveal the terrified man beneath. "He is here," he whispered, his hand trembling as he adjusted his bow tie. "In the library. He is waiting for you." He was Cillian O'Malley, a name that was never spoken in the polite drawing rooms of Fifth Avenue, but was whispered with a mixture of fear and reverence in the smoky back rooms of the city's most powerful speakeasies. He was a gangster, a bootlegger, the enigmatic and untouchable king of a vast, illicit empire. He was also their final, most desperate creditor. Her father, in a last foolish gamble, had borrowed a fortune from him, a man who did not deal in second chances. "What does he want, Papa?" Genevieve asked, her heart a cold, hard knot in her chest. "He has made an offer," her father said, unable to meet her gaze. "A way out, for all of us. He will erase the debt. He will set us up with a new, smaller but respectable life. In exchange," he trailed off, his shame a palpable, suffocating thing. But Genevieve already knew. In their world, when a powerful man offered to save a desperate family, there was only ever one price. With a quiet, steely resolve she did not feel, she walked out of the loud, false gaiety of the ballroom and down the silent, shadowed hallway to the library. The room was dark, lit only by the low fire crackling in the hearth. A tall, imposing figure stood with his back to her, looking out the large window at the glittering, indifferent lights of the city. "Mr. O'Malley," she said, her voice a clear, steady bell in the quiet room. He turned. He was not the brutish, thuggish monster she had imagined. He was in his late 30s, devastatingly handsome, in a way that was almost criminal in itself. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored black tuxedo, but he wore it with the dangerous, predatory grace of a panther. His hair was as black as a raven's wing, and his eyes, a startling, brilliant shade of blue, seemed to see right through her, to the terrified, racing heart beneath her calm facade. This was Cillian the Wraith O'Malley, a man so named because he moved through the city's underworld like a ghost, his power felt everywhere, his presence seen only when he willed it. "Miss Hayes," he said, his voice a low, smooth baritone with the faint, musical lilt of his native Ireland. "Thank you for joining me." "My father said you had a proposition for him," she said, her hands clasped before her to stop them from trembling. A proposition that involves me. It does, he said, his gaze sweeping over her, an unreadable expression on his face. Your father is a fool, a man drowning in his own delusions, but he was once a friend to my father in the old country. It is a debt of honor I feel obligated to address. I am prepared to erase his considerable debt to me, to ensure your family's quiet and comfortable retirement. But such generosity requires a gesture of good faith, a collateral. And I am the collateral, she stated, her voice devoid of emotion. You are, he confirmed, taking a step closer. I, like your father, have a need to maintain a certain image. In my world, power is everything, and there is no greater symbol of a man's power than the woman on his arm. I find myself in need of a wife, a hostess, a woman of impeccable breeding and untouchable class to preside over my social engagements, a beautiful, silent partner to prove to my rivals that I am not just a back-alley bootlegger, but a king. He smiled, a slow, dangerous smile that did not reach his eyes. You, Miss Hayes, with your society name and your finishing school grace, are perfectly suited for the role. It was the most cold-blooded, insulting, and terrifying proposal she had ever heard. He was not asking for her hand. He was demanding a living, breathing symbol of his own success. She was to be his most prized acquisition, the ultimate proof that he, the boy from the Dublin slums, had finally conquered their world. And what if I refuse? She asked, her voice a defiant whisper. Then your father's world and yours will come to a very public and very ugly end, he replied simply, without a trace of malice. It was just a fact. The choice, of course, is yours. She looked at this man, this handsome, monstrous gangster, and she thought of her family, of their pride, of the life they were about to lose. She thought of the desperate, terrified look in her father's eyes. Her life, her dreams, her very soul felt like a small price to pay for their salvation. I have one condition, she said, her voice finding a new, surprising strength. His eyebrow arched in surprise. Oh? This will be a partnership in name only, she declared, her gaze unwavering. I will be your hostess. I will play the part of your wife in public. But my life, my heart will remain my own. We will share a roof, but we will not share a bed. He stared at her for a long, silent moment, and then, to her utter astonishment, he threw back his head and laughed, a deep, genuine, and utterly captivating sound. Miss Hayes, he said, a new, admiring light in his brilliant blue eyes. You are a far better negotiator than your father. You have a deal. He walked to his desk and produced a simple, handwritten contract. A 1-year arrangement, he said, to begin after a simple civil ceremony next week. After 1 year, if we both agree, the contract can be renegotiated. She took the pen he offered, her hand steady, and signed her name. She had just agreed to serve a monster to save her family. But as she looked at the man before her, at the surprising intelligence and the hidden, dangerous charm in his eyes, she had the terrifying, thrilling feeling that the man she had just agreed to marry was a far more complex and far more dangerous beast than she had ever imagined. The civil ceremony that bound Genevieve Hayes to Cillian O'Malley was an affair as cold and as impersonal as the business contract that had orchestrated it. It took place in a dusty, forgotten chamber in the city courthouse, a room that smelled of old paper and legal finality. Genevieve wore a simple but elegant traveling suit of deep blue, a silent statement of her own quiet dignity. Cillian stood beside her, a figure of dark, imposing power in a perfectly tailored suit, his handsome face an unreadable mask. Their vows were brief, legalistic sentences, their promises hollow echoes in the quiet room. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Cillian did not kiss her. He simply took her gloved hand and brushed his lips against her knuckles, a gesture that was less an act of affection and more a formal acknowledgement of a transfer of ownership. She was now, in the eyes of the law, Mrs. Cillian O'Malley. She was his, Their new home was a magnificent 7-story townhouse on a quiet, exclusive street in the East 60s, a fortress of limestone and dark, tinted glass that was as private and as impenetrable as the man himself. As the heavy, ornate front door closed behind them, shutting out the noise of the city, a profound and absolute silence descended. The interior was a masterpiece of masculine Art Deco design. It was a world of polished black marble, of gleaming chrome, of stark geometric lines. It was a place of immense wealth and impeccable taste. But it was not a home. It was a museum, a silent, beautiful gallery curated to showcase the power and the solitude of its owner. "Welcome to your new residence, Mrs. O'Malley," Cillian said, his voice a low, formal murmur that did nothing to warm the cool air. He gestured to a stern, gray-haired woman in a housekeeper's uniform, who had appeared as if from nowhere. "This is Mrs. Davies. She will manage the household staff and will see to your needs. She will show you to your rooms." The subtle pause before the word rooms was a clear, deliberate reminder of their agreement. She was the mistress of the house, but she was not to be the mistress of its master. "The suite of rooms, Mrs." Davies led her to was in the east wing of the house, a world away from Cillian's own private quarters in the west. It was a space of breathtaking luxury, a spacious sitting room, a magnificent bedroom, and a marble bathroom that was larger than the entire parlor of her family's old home. But it was impersonal, a beautiful gilded cage waiting for its new occupant. "The master's instructions are clear, madam," Mrs. Davies said, her voice crisp and professional. "You are to have everything you require. A dressmaker will be arriving in the morning to create a suitable wardrobe for you. The master entertains frequently. You will be expected to preside as his hostess. Dinner is at 8 o'clock. The master will expect you in the main dining hall." And with that, Genevieve was left alone. She walked to the large, bulletproof window and looked out at the city. She had done it. She had saved her family. But in doing so, she had traded her old gilded cage for a new, larger, and infinitely more dangerous one. Her new life was a study in paradoxes. By day, she was a prisoner, confined to the beautiful, silent house. But it was a prison of unimaginable luxury. She had an endless allowance, a staff that catered to her every whim, a wardrobe of exquisite couture gowns. She was surrounded by beauty, yet she was profoundly, achingly lonely. The true nature of her role became clear at their first dinner party, a week after the wedding. Cillian was hosting a gathering of the city's most powerful and most dangerous men, fellow bootleggers, city officials on his payroll, shadowy financiers. Genevieve descended the grand staircase, a vision of untouchable elegance in a shimmering, silver-beaded gown. She was the perfect hostess. She moved through the room with a calm, innate grace, her finishing school manners a stark, fascinating contrast to the rough, street-hardened men who were her guests. She was his ultimate status symbol, the living proof that Cillian O'Malley, the boy from the Dublin slums, could not only conquer their city but could also possess one of their own blue-blooded daughters. He watched her from across the room, a look of cool, possessive pride in his brilliant blue eyes. She was playing her part to perfection, but as the evening wore on, he began to see something more. He saw the sharp intelligence in her eyes as she listened to the men's conversations. He saw the subtle, almost imperceptible way she would guide a conversation away from a dangerous topic or smooth over a tense moment with a witty, disarming remark. She was not just a beautiful object. She was a woman of substance, a keen observer with a mind as sharp as his own. And this, he found, was a far more intoxicating quality than mere beauty. Their own dinners, on the nights they were alone, became a silent, charged battle of wills. They would sit at opposite ends of a long, polished dining table, the cavernous room a physical representation of the distance between them. He would watch her, his gaze intense, trying to see past the perfect, polite mask of the society wife she had adopted. She in turn would meet his gaze, her own expression a cool, unreadable challenge. One evening, unable to bear the silence any longer, she spoke. "Your home is beautiful, Mr. O'Malley, but it is very quiet. Does it never feel empty to you? He looked at her, surprised by her directness. I have always found solitude to be a necessary component of success, Mrs. O'Malley. And what of happiness? She countered softly. A flicker of something, a long-buried pain crossed his features before being ruthlessly suppressed. Happiness, he said, his voice a cool, flat baritone, is a luxury for poets and fools. Ideal in power, it is a far more reliable currency. It was a glimpse, just a fleeting glimpse of the man behind the monster, a man who had deliberately and perhaps painfully excised all emotion from his life. And it was in that moment that Genevieve realized her true role in this house was not to be his hostess. It was to be his adversary, the one person in his carefully controlled world who would dare to challenge his silence, who would dare to speak of the very thing he had so long denied himself, a heart. She did not know it yet, but the true battle for Blackwood Manor, and for the soul of its master, had just begun. And the weapons would not be guns or contracts, but whispered words, shared glances, and the slow, dangerous, and undeniable thawing of two lonely, guarded hearts. The vast, silent dining room became Genevieve's first battlefield, and her weapons were words. Night after night, she continued her gentle, relentless assault on the fortress of Cillian O'Malley's silence. She did not speak of personal matters, of feelings, or of the past. That would have been a tactical error, a direct attack that his defenses were perfectly designed to repel. Instead, she spoke of the world. She spoke of the art she had seen in the city's galleries, of the changing politics in Europe she read about in the newspapers, of the philosophical questions posed by the authors on his shelves. She was a brilliant conversationalist, her finishing school education finally finding a purpose beyond polite, meaningless chatter. She did not fill the silence with noise but with ideas. She would offer an opinion, a sharp, insightful observation, and then she would fall silent, leaving the idea hanging in the air between them, a challenge he could not ignore. At first he would parry with a curt, dismissive remark, but he was a man of immense intelligence, and her intellect was a lure he could not resist. He found himself, against his will, being drawn into her debates. His one-word answers became reluctant sentences. The sentences became sharp, insightful counterarguments. He had not engaged his mind in this way, with an equal in years. Their dinners transformed from a cold, contractual obligation into a nightly duel of wits, a high-stakes chess game of words and ideas played across a polished expanse of mahogany. And through these conversations, she began to see the man. He was far more than a brutish gangster. He was a self-taught scholar, a man whose mind was as sharp and as complex as a surgeon's scalpel. He possessed a deep, cynical, but brilliant understanding of history, of human nature, of the intricate machinery of power that moved the world. He, in turn, began to see the woman. She was not just a beautiful, well-bred ornament. She was a formidable intellect, her mind as quick and as agile as his own. He would watch her, the candlelight flickering in her intelligent, expressive eyes as she dismantled one of his arguments, and he would feel a new, unfamiliar, and deeply unsettling emotion: admiration. The asset he had acquired for her beauty was proving to have a mind that was even more captivating. The true discovery, however, came with the library. One rainy afternoon, driven by a desire to better understand the man she had married, Genevieve ventured into the one room in the house that seemed to be his true sanctuary. It was a magnificent two-story library, paneled in dark, fragrant cedar wood. But unlike the rest of the house, which was a monument to cold, modern perfection, the library was a place of comfortable, lived-in chaos. Books were everywhere, stacked on tables, spilling from shelves, left open on chairs. It was the only room in the house that had a soul. His soul. She spent the afternoon exploring, her hands tracing the spines of the books. His collection was a map of his mind. There were the expected volumes on business and finance, on military strategy and political theory. But there was also a vast, surprising collection of Irish literature and history. Books of Gaelic poetry, their pages worn and thumbed. Biographies of Irish revolutionaries. collections of ancient myths and legends. It was the library of a man who had never forgotten where he came from, a man who harbored the heart of a poet and a rebel beneath the cold, hard exterior of a gangster. She was standing on a rolling ladder, reaching for a volume of Yeats on a high shelf, when she heard the soft click of the library door. She turned, startled, to see Cillian standing there watching her. His face was unreadable, but his brilliant blue eyes were narrowed, and she felt a jolt of fear. She was an intruder in his most private, sacred space. He did not speak. He simply walked into the room, his presence seeming to fill the entire vast space. He came to a stop at the bottom of the ladder and looked up at her. "You are trespassing, Mrs. O'Malley," he said, his voice a low, quiet murmur that was more unnerving than any shout. "I was looking for a book," she replied, her own voice steady, though her heart was pounding. "I did not realize this room was forbidden." "It is not forbidden," he said, his gaze intense. "It is simply mine." He looked around the room at the chaotic, beloved mess of his books. "This is the only room in this house that is not a performance. It is the only place that is real." He looked back up at her, at the intelligent, unafraid woman who had dared to enter his inner sanctum. "What do you think of it?" he asked, the question a genuine, vulnerable inquiry. "I think," she said softly, looking from the books to the man, "that it is the library of a king in exile." Her words, her immediate, intuitive understanding of the core of his being, seemed to strike him with a physical force. The cold, guarded mask dropped from his face, and for a fleeting, breathtaking moment she saw the man beneath, a man of profound, aching loneliness, a man who missed a home he had never truly had. He took a step forward and placed a hand on the ladder, his fingers just inches from her foot. The simple, almost accidental proximity was an electric shock. The air grew thick, charged with a tension that had nothing to do with their battle of wits. It was something older, more primal. "And what does a king in exile do?" he murmured, his gaze holding hers captive, "when he finds a queen has wandered into his lonely kingdom?" She could not answer. The moment stretched, a silent, powerful acknowledgement of the deep, undeniable attraction that had been simmering beneath the surface of their intellectual duels. It was a dangerous, thrilling, and utterly terrifying moment. The spell was broken by the sharp, insistent ringing of the telephone on his desk. It was a jarring, modern intrusion into their timeless, book-lined world. With a low, frustrated curse, Cillian turned away to answer it, the mask of the ruthless businessman slamming back into place. Genevieve quickly descended the ladder, her body trembling, and retreated to the far side of the room, pretending to browse a shelf. She could hear his side of the conversation, his voice now a low, cold, and dangerous weapon. "He is late with the payment?" "No. No more warnings. It is time to send a message. Yes. Tonight." She listened, her blood turning to ice. The poet, the scholar, the lonely king in exile, was gone. In his place was the monster, the gangster, the man who ordered violence with the same cool detachment with which he ordered his dinner. When he hung up the phone, he turned and saw her standing there, her face pale, her eyes wide with a new and profound understanding of the man she had married. She had seen both sides of him now, the beast of honor and the beast of pure, cold, and ruthless power. He walked towards her, his expression unreadable once more. "It seems," he said, his voice a low, quiet murmur, "that you have discovered not all of my business is conducted in books." He stopped before her, so close she could feel the dangerous energy radiating from him. He lifted a hand and gently, almost mockingly, tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "Do I frighten you, Mrs. O'Malley?" She looked up into his brilliant, dangerous, and impossibly beautiful blue eyes. She saw the king, the poet, and the monster, all warring within him. And she knew with a terrifying certainty that she was not afraid. She was utterly, completely, and hopelessly captivated. "No, Mr. O'Malley," she whispered, her voice a defiant challenge. You do not. The library, which had once been the stage for their intellectual duels, was now a place of profound and dangerous intimacy. The aftermath of Cillian's cold-blooded phone call and Genevieve's defiant lack of fear had irrevocably changed the air between them. They were no longer simply a master and his contracted wife. They were two people who had seen the unvarnished truth of each other's souls, his ruthlessness, her courage, and had not turned away. This shared dangerous knowledge became a new, unspoken language between them, a silent acknowledgement of the complex, contradictory forces that drew them together. Their nightly dinners transformed. The vast mahogany table no longer felt like a desolate no-man's land. Cillian, as if by some unspoken accord, had her place-setting moved closer to his own, shrinking the physical distance that had once symbolized their emotional one. Their conversations now held a new, raw honesty. She would ask him questions about his empire, not with the naive curiosity of an outsider, but with the sharp analytical mind of a partner. She wanted to understand the machinery of his world, the intricate web of power and loyalty he commanded. He, in turn, found himself answering with a candor that astonished him. He had spent his life surrounded by men who either feared him or wanted something from him. He had never had a confidant, an equal with whom he could discuss the grim realities of his reign. He spoke of the delicate balance of power he maintained, of the constant threat from rivals, of the brutal choices he was often forced to make. He was not confessing his sins, he was simply stating the facts of his existence. And she listened, not with judgment, but with a profound, empathetic understanding that he was a man playing a deadly game with a set of rules he had not created, but had simply mastered in order to survive. The true test of their new dynamic came a week later. It was a cold, rainy evening, and Cillian was preparing to go out. He was dressed not in his usual impeccable tuxedo, but in a simpler, darker suit, the kind of attire meant for blending into the shadows. A grim, hard look was in his eyes, the look of the gangster, the enforcer. "I have business to attend to," he said to Genevieve, his tone leaving no room for questions. "I will be late." But she, who was no longer the timid girl who had signed a contract in her father's library, stood her ground. "What kind of business, Cillian?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. He looked at her, a flicker of his old cold authority in his eyes. "It does not concern you." "Everything you do concerns me now," she countered, her gaze unwavering. "I am your wife, your partner. I will not be shielded from the truth of the life I have chosen to share with you." He stared at her, a silent battle of wills passing between them. He saw the iron in her spine, the quiet, unshakable strength that he had come to admire so deeply, and he knew she was right. To treat her as a fragile doll to be protected was an insult to the formidable woman she was. With a deep, weary sigh, he relented. "There is a man," he began, his voice a low, hard rumble. "A small-time bookkeeper from one of my establishments. He was caught skimming from the profits. Not a large amount, but the principal. In my world, loyalty is the only currency that matters. Betrayal must have a consequence." Genevieve's heart went cold. She knew what that meant. He was going to deliver a message, a brutal, violent lesson that would ensure no one else ever dared to cross him. The monster she had glimpsed on the telephone was about to be unleashed. "And what is the consequence?" she asked, her voice a whisper. "That," he said, his eyes as cold and as hard as a winter sea, "is what I must decide." He turned to leave. "Take me with you," she said, the words leaving her lips before she could stop them. He froze, turning to look at her as if she had gone mad. "Absolutely not. It is no place for you." "You said you wanted a partner," she pressed, walking towards him. "A partner does not hide from the difficult parts of the business. You said you value my perspective. Then let me see this world you inhabit. Let me understand it. Let me understand you. Or is our partnership just another performance, confined to the safety of this house?" Her challenge, her accusation of inauthenticity, struck him where he was most vulnerable. He looked at her, at the fierce, intelligent fire in her eyes, and knew he was defeated. To deny her this was to deny the very foundation of their new, honest relationship. "Very well," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "You will come. You will wait in the car, and you will see the consequences of a broken code." He took her to a grim, industrial part of the city, a place of dark, looming warehouses and empty, rain-slicked streets. He parked the car in a dark alley overlooking the back entrance of a small, grimy tavern. "Wait here," he commanded, his face a hard, unreadable mask. He then melted into the shadows, disappearing into the tavern. Genevieve waited, her heart pounding a frantic, terrified rhythm against her ribs. She was a fool. What was she doing here? She was about to be a witness to a brutal, violent act, an act that would forever change the way she saw the man she was beginning to love. After what felt like an eternity, the back door of the tavern opened. Two of Cillian's large, imposing men emerged, dragging a smaller, weeping man between them. It was the bookkeeper. He was pale with terror, his face a mess of tears and desperation. They threw him to his knees in the muddy alley. Then Cillian emerged. He moved with a slow, deliberate grace, a predator approaching his cornered prey. He stood before the weeping man, a figure of absolute, terrifying power in the dim, flickering light of the single gas lamp. "You stole from me, Thomas," Cillian said, his voice a quiet, deadly whisper that cut through the sound of the rain. "Please, Mr. O'Malley," the man sobbed. "It was my wife. She is sick. The doctor's bills, I was going to pay it back, I swear it." From the car, Genevieve's heart broke. She saw not a thief, but a desperate man, a man who had made a foolish choice for the love of his family. She had seen that same desperation in her own father's eyes. Cillian was silent for a long moment, his face unreadable. He reached into his coat, and Genevieve's breath caught in her throat. He was going to, but he did not pull out a weapon. He pulled out his wallet. He took out a thick wad of bills and tossed it onto the ground in front of the kneeling man. "This is for your wife's doctor," Cillian said, his voice a low, hard command. "You will see that she gets the best care. You will then have 1 week to pack your things and take your family out of this city. You will go west. You will start a new life. And you will never, ever return to Chicago." He leaned in closer. "Your theft is a debt. But your wife's health, that is a matter of a man's honor. I do not wage war on a man's family. That is not my code." He then turned to his two large men. "Put him on a train," he said, "and see that he has a job waiting for him in Omaha, a real one, on the books." He then turned and walked back to the car without a backward glance, leaving the bookkeeper sobbing on the ground, not in terror, but in a state of profound, disbelieving relief. Cillian slid into the driver's seat beside Genevieve. He did not look at her. He simply stared out at the rain-slicked street, his handsome face a mask of controlled, weary emotion. She was utterly speechless. She had expected to see a monster. She had braced herself for an act of brutal, violent retribution. Instead, she had witnessed an act of profound, almost biblical mercy. He had not just spared the man. He had saved him. He had given him a second chance. She reached out, her hand gently covering his where it rested on the steering wheel. He did not pull away. "A beast of honor," she whispered, her voice full of a quiet, overwhelming awe. He finally turned to look at her, and in the dim light of the alley she saw the full, complex, and beautiful truth of the man she had married. She saw the gangster, the king, the poet, the exile. And she saw the man who, in the heart of his dark and violent world, still possessed a code of honor so profound, so deeply ingrained, it was the very core of his being. He had shown her his world. He had shown her his truth. And in that moment, her fascination, her admiration, her compassion, it all coalesced into a single, simple, and unshakable certainty. She was in love with him, completely, irrevocably, and with every fiber of her soul. The drive back to the Fifth Avenue townhouse was a journey through a different city. The rain had stopped, and the wet streets of New York now reflected the glittering, vibrant lights of a world waking up to the night. For Genevieve, It was as if a veil had been lifted. She was seeing the world and the man beside her with a new and profound clarity. The fear that had been her constant low-grade companion since the day she had signed the contract was gone, replaced by a feeling so powerful and so absolute it was almost overwhelming. She loved him. She loved the monster, the king, the poet, the beast of honor. She loved all the complex, contradictory, and beautiful pieces of Cillian O'Malley. He was silent during the drive, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles white. The events of the evening, the confrontation with his own code, had clearly taken a toll. He had been a king dispensing a strange and merciful justice, but he was also a man who had been forced to expose the workings of his dark world to the one person whose opinion he had, to his own astonishment, come to value above all others. He had shown her his fangs, and he did not yet know if she would recoil in fear or accept the beast she now knew him to be. When they arrived back at the townhouse, the silence that greeted them in the grand marble foyer was different. It was no longer a symbol of their emotional distance, but a quiet waiting space, pregnant with the unspoken truth of what had passed between them in the alley. "Thank you for accompanying me tonight, Genevieve," he said, his voice a low, formal rumble as he removed his coat. It was a retreat to the safety of their old, established roles, but Genevieve would not allow it. She had seen his soul, and she would not let him hide it from her again. "I was not your companion tonight, Cillian," she said softly, her voice so full of a quiet, unshakable certainty that it made him stop and turn to face her. "I was your partner, and I am proud of the man I stood with." Her words, a simple, absolute validation of his actions, of his honor, seemed to strike him with the force of a physical blow. He stared at her, his brilliant blue eyes full of a raw, unguarded emotion. He had spent his life building an empire of power and fear, commanding the loyalty of men through intimidation and wealth. He had never, in his entire life, known the simple, profound power of a good woman's pride in him. "You should not be," he said, his voice a raw whisper. "I am not a good man. I am a man who deals in violence and shadows." "You are the most honorable man I have ever known," she countered, taking a step towards him. "Honor is not about being perfect, Cillian. It is about having a code. It is about choosing mercy when the world expects brutality. That is what you did tonight. You did not just save that man's life. You saved his family. You saved his future. That is the act of a king, not a monster." She was dismantling his defenses piece by piece with the simple, powerful truth of what she had seen. He felt the walls he had so carefully constructed around his own heart begin to tremble and crack. "I have nothing to offer you, Genevieve," he said, his voice thick with a lifetime of self-imposed loneliness. "This life, it is a dangerous, empty cage." "Then you are a fool, Cillian O'Malley," she whispered, stopping just before him, her hand coming up to gently, bravely touch his cheek. "Because you do not see what I see. I see a man who has built a kingdom, who protects his people, who has a heart so full of a fierce, lonely honor that it breaks my own." Tears streamed down her face now, not of sorrow, but of the overwhelming power of the love she could no longer deny. "I am in love with you," she said, the confession a simple, beautiful, and absolute truth. "I love the man who discusses poetry in the library, and I love the man who dispenses a king's justice in a dark alley. I love all of you." Her confession, so pure and so absolute, was his final undoing. The king, the gangster, the monster, it all fell away, leaving only the man, a man who was, for the first time in his life, completely and utterly seen. He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a decade, a sound that was half a sob, half a laugh of profound relief. He pulled her into his arms, his embrace not one of passion, but of a desperate, soul-deep need. He buried his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of her, the scent of a home he had never known he was searching for. "Genevieve," he breathed, her name a prayer. He pulled back, his hands framing her face, and he kissed her. It was not the kiss of a king claiming his prize. It was the kiss of a man surrendering his heart. It was a kiss of profound, overwhelming gratitude, of a lonely soul finally finding its harbor. It was a kiss that sealed not a contract, but a vow. When they broke apart, the world had been remade. The gilded cage of their arrangement was gone. In its place stood the foundations of a new and powerful reality. "The contract we signed is a lie," he said, his voice a raw, emotional murmur. "A piece of paper that means nothing. I do not want a wife in name only, a hostess for my parties. I want you, in my life, in my home, in my heart, always." He took her hand, the one that still bore the simple gold band he had placed there in a cold judge's chamber. He lifted it to his lips. "This ring is a symbol of a business deal," he said. "It is not worthy of you." He gently slid it from her finger. He then reached into his waistcoat pocket and retrieved a small velvet box. He opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark silk, was the most magnificent ring she had ever seen. A large, square-cut sapphire, the exact color of his eyes, flanked by 2 brilliant diamonds. "My mother's," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "She was a woman of great strength and a quiet, fierce love, just like you. She told me to give it to the woman who was not just a queen for my kingdom, but the queen of my heart." He knelt before her, there in the grand, silent foyer of his house, the powerful, feared Cillian O'Malley on one knee before the woman who had conquered his soul. "Marry me, Genevieve Hayes," he said, his blue eyes shining with a love so powerful it was a physical force. "Not by contract, not for a year, for a lifetime. Be my wife, be my partner, be my queen." She looked down at this incredible, complex, and beautiful man, at the love and the hope that was shining on his face. Her journey, which had begun in a desperate act of sacrifice, had led her to this impossible, perfect moment. "Yes, Cillian," she whispered, her own voice full of a joyful, tearful certainty. "Yes, I will marry you." The morning after their true engagement was like the first day of a new world. The grand, silent townhouse on Fifth Avenue, once a symbol of their cold, contractual arrangement, was now imbued with a fragile, hopeful warmth. When Genevieve awoke in the magnificent master suite, his suite, now theirs, she found Cillian sitting in an armchair by the large window, watching her. The fearsome gangster was gone, replaced by a man whose brilliant blue eyes were full of a soft, unguarded tenderness that made her heart ache with a profound, quiet joy. Their old life, with its separate rooms and silent dinners, was a ghost they both silently agreed to exorcise. The barriers between them, of his power, of her servitude, of their different pasts, had been shattered by his heartfelt proposal. Now they were faced with the far more complex and delicate task of building a real life together, a life that existed not just in the private sanctuary of their home, but in the harsh, judgmental light of the world outside. "Good morning, Mrs. O'Malley," he murmured, a slow, genuine smile spreading across his handsome face as she stirred. "Good morning, Cillian," she replied, the name still a beautiful, strange melody on her tongue. The first order of business was to dismantle the lie of their old life. The original contract, which Genevieve had signed with such a heavy heart, was brought from his safe. Together, they stood before the grand library fireplace and watched as the paper, the symbol of her sacrifice, curled into black, meaningless ash. It was a ritual of liberation, a final, definitive end to the bargain that had brought them together, and the true beginning of the partnership they had chosen. Their days fell into a new, wonderful rhythm. They were inseparable. He, a man who had not taken a day off in a decade, now delegated the daily running of his empire to his trusted lieutenants. He wanted to spend every moment with her, to learn the woman he had fallen in love with. He discovered her quiet, wicked sense of humor, her surprising passion for the fast-paced chaos of a baseball game, her deep, abiding love for the simple, profound beauty of a Central Park sunrise. She was a woman of 1,000 beautiful, unexpected layers, and he was a man determined to explore every single one. She, in turn, dedicated herself to understanding his world. He took her not to the glamorous, public-facing speakeasies that were the jewels in his crown, but to the heart of his empire. The quiet, unassuming community centers, the soup kitchens, and the immigrant aid societies in the working-class Irish neighborhoods that he secretly and anonymously funded. She saw the other side of his ruthless power, a deep, fierce, and paternalistic loyalty to the people he had come from, the people the rest of the city had forgotten. She saw the orphanages he supported, the widows he provided for. She saw the beast of honor in action, and her love for him deepened into a profound, soul-deep respect. He was not a good man, not in the way the world defined it. He was a man who lived by a harsh, often brutal code, but he was a just man, a king who, in his own dark kingdom, took care of his own, and she, he made it clear, was now his own. The most difficult challenge they faced was her family. Her father, having been saved from ruin by Cillian's initial cold transaction, was now living comfortably, his health and his pride restored. But he did not know the truth of the man his daughter had married. To him, Cillian O'Malley was a respectable, if intensely private, businessman. "We must tell them, Cillian," Genevieve said one evening, as they sat in the quiet of the library. "I cannot build my happiness on a foundation of lies to my own family." Cillian's face hardened. "Your father is a man of old-world principles, Genevieve. He is a good, simple man. He will not understand my world. He will not understand me. He will see a gangster, and he will demand I release you. He will see the man who loves his daughter," she countered gently. "And he will see the man who saved his family with an act of quiet, unexpected honor. You must trust him, Cillian. You must trust me." The meeting took place at the townhouse. Genevieve's father, mother, and siblings arrived, dressed in their Sunday best, their faces a mixture of awe and nervous apprehension at being in the home of the legendary Cillian O'Malley. Cillian was a masterful host, his natural charm putting them at ease. But after a polite, formal dinner, he led Genevieve's father into the library, the doors closing with a soft, final thud. Genevieve waited in the parlor with her mother, her heart pounding. She was placing all of her faith in two men, the father she loved and the husband she adored. Inside the library, Cillian did not prevaricate. He stood before his father-in-law, a man he respected, and he told him the truth. He spoke of his life, of his empire built in the shadows of prohibition, of the violent, dangerous world he commanded. He did not ask for forgiveness or approval. He simply stated the facts of his existence. Her father listened, his face growing paler with each revelation. When Cillian had finished, a long, heavy silence filled the room. "You are a gangster," her father said finally, his voice a low, horrified whisper. "You have put my daughter, my Genevieve, in the heart of a dangerous criminal world." "Yes," Cillian replied, his own voice quiet but firm. "I have, but I can also promise you this, Mr. Hayes. In my world, she is not a pawn or a victim. She is a queen. She is safer with me than she would be with any other man in this city. She is protected not just by my wealth, but by the fierce, unwavering loyalty of every man who works for me. And she has my heart, my complete and utter devotion for all of my days. I love her, and I will spend the rest of my life ensuring her happiness and her safety. You have my word. The word of a beast, perhaps, but a beast of honor." Another long silence stretched. Genevieve's father looked at this powerful, dangerous man, who was confessing his sins not with arrogance, but with a profound, humble honesty. He saw the love, the absolute, unshakable love in Cillian's eyes when he spoke of his daughter. And he, a man who had made his own share of desperate choices, understood. He stood up and walked to the man who was his daughter's husband. He did not offer his condemnation. He offered his hand. "Then you will care for my girl, Mr. Malley," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You will see that no harm comes to her. I will die before I let any harm come to her," Cillian replied, his grip firm. When they emerged from the library, the unspoken war was over. The two most important men in Genevieve's life were not enemies, but allies, bound by their shared love for her. That night, as they lay together in the quiet of their room, the city lights glittering below them, Genevieve felt a profound sense of peace. The last secret had been told. The last lie had been dismantled. "He called you a gangster," she murmured, her head resting on his chest. "I am," he said, his arms tightening around her. "He also called you an honorable man," she whispered. "That," he said, his voice a low, rough murmur against her hair, "is only because of you. You are the honor in my life, Genevieve. You are my code." He kissed her then, a kiss of profound, grateful love. The bargain was over. The battle for her family's acceptance was won. Their life together, once a contract signed in the shadows, was now ready to be lived, openly and honestly, in the light. The acceptance of Genevieve's father was the final, quiet benediction on their union. With the last secret dismantled, a profound and joyful peace settled over the Fifth Avenue townhouse. The ghosts of their separate, lonely pasts had been banished, replaced by the vibrant, hopeful light of their shared future. They were no longer two individuals bound by a contract, but a team, a partnership forged in the crucible of secrets and solidified by a deep, unwavering love. Their days fell into a beautiful, purposeful rhythm. They began to plan their real wedding, not a cold, legalistic affair in a dusty judge's chamber, but a true celebration of their love. It was to be a small, intimate ceremony held in the spring, in the magnificent glass conservatory of the Long Island estate Cillian owned but had never used, a place Genevieve was determined to fill with life and flowers. The guest list was small, comprised only of her family and the few loyal members of his inner circle, like Leo, who had come to view Genevieve with a fierce, brotherly protectiveness. The city, which had once been a source of gossip and judgment, now seemed to embrace their unlikely love story. The tale of the honorable gangster and the society queen who had seen his true heart became a modern-day fairy tale, whispered with a new kind of reverence in the very speakeasies he controlled. Their union was not a scandal, it was a legend. During this peaceful interlude, Genevieve truly came into her own. She was no longer just the mistress of the house. She became Cillian's most trusted confidant, his partner in all things. He, a man who had never trusted anyone completely, found himself sharing the intricate details of his empire with her. She possessed a sharp, intuitive mind for strategy that constantly surprised him. She would sit with him in the library, reviewing his ledgers, both the legitimate and the less so, and her insights were often brilliant. She saw the human element, the subtle shifts in loyalty and ambition among his men, in a way his own pragmatic, power-focused mind often missed. She was not just his queen, she was his most valuable counselor. This idyllic peace, however, was a fragile thing, a beautiful garden blooming on the edge of a volcano. Cillian's world was one of constant, shifting alliances and simmering rivalries. And his newfound happiness, his open devotion to his wife, was seen by some not as a source of strength, but as a fatal weakness. The serpent in their garden was a man named Liam Doyle. Doyle was one of Cillian's oldest and most ambitious captains, a man whose loyalty had always been secondary to his own insatiable hunger for power. He had watched Cillian's transformation with a growing contempt. He saw the quiet evenings at home, the talk of weddings and flowers, the influence of this high society woman as a sign that the Wraith had gone soft, that the beast of honor had lost its fangs. And in that perceived weakness, Doyle saw his opportunity. The plan he hatched was one of pure, venomous treachery. He knew that Cillian's greatest strength, and now his greatest vulnerability, was his love for Genevieve. To destroy Cillian, he would first have to destroy her. The attack came not in a dark alley with guns, but in the bright, respectable light of day. Genevieve had taken on a personal project, a small charity to support the impoverished families of the dock workers in her father's old shipping district. It was a quiet, noble work that brought her immense satisfaction, One afternoon, as she was leaving the small office she had established, she was approached by two federal agents from the Bureau of Prohibition. They were polite, but their eyes were as hard and as cold as steel. "Mrs. O'Malley," one of them asked. "Yes," Genevieve replied, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. "We have a warrant to search this premises," the agent said, holding up the official document. "We have received an anonymous tip that this charity is being used as a front for your husband's bootlegging operations." Genevieve stared at him, her mind reeling. It was a lie, a complete and utter fabrication. But it was a brilliant one, an attack not on Cillian's known criminal enterprises, but on her own innocent charitable work. It was designed to drag her name, her respectable, blue-blooded name, through the mud, to taint her with the very criminality she had tried so hard to understand and accept in her husband. The raid was a public spectacle. The agents tore her small office apart, their actions deliberately theatrical for the benefit of the reporters who had been, coincidentally, alerted to the scene. The headlines the next day were exactly what Doyle had hoped for. "Society brides charity a gangster's front. Mrs. O'Malley implicated in bootlegging ring." The scandal was a devastating blow. It was an attack on the one thing Genevieve had tried to build for herself, her own small corner of good in a complicated world. She felt the familiar, sickening sting of public shame, the same shame that had brought her to Cillian's door in the first place. When Cillian saw the headlines, the cold, murderous rage that returned to his eyes was something Genevieve had not seen since the night of Mancini's attack on his bookstore in their previous story's life. This was not an attack on him. This was an attack on her, and that was a sin for which there could be no mercy. His intelligence network worked swiftly. Within hours, he knew the source of the anonymous tip. He knew of Doyle's treachery. "He has signed his own death warrant," Cillian said, his voice a low, terrifying whisper as he stood in their library, the offending newspaper crumpled in his fist. "No, Cillian," Genevieve said, her voice quiet but firm. She came to him and took the crumpled paper from his hand, smoothing it out on the desk. She was frightened, yes, but her fear was overshadowed by a cold, clear anger of her own. "That is what he wants. He wants you to react with violence. He wants you to become the monster again, to prove to the world that you are nothing but a common thug, and that I have corrupted you, or you me. We will not give him that satisfaction." He looked at her, at the fierce, intelligent fire in her eyes. "He has chosen the battlefield," she continued, her mind working with a sharp, strategic clarity that mirrored his own. "He has chosen the law. He thinks it is his weapon against us. But he has forgotten one thing. He is a gangster playing a lawyer's game. But you, my love," she said, a slow, dangerous smile on her face, "you are a king, and I am your queen. We will not just fight him in a courtroom. We will hold a court of our own." Her plan, when she laid it out, was as brilliant and as audacious as the one he had once used against a rival. It was a plan that would use Doyle's own treachery as a weapon against him, a plan that would turn his public attack into a public execution. Cillian listened, his initial rage being replaced by a profound, almost worshipful admiration for his wife. He had thought he needed to protect her from his world. He was beginning to realize that she was, in fact, his greatest weapon. "You are terrifying, Mrs. O'Malley," he murmured, pulling her into his arms. "I learned from the best, Mr. O'Malley," she replied, her arms wrapping around his neck. The final battle for their empire and for their future was about to begin, and this time, the Queen would be leading the charge. The city of Chicago was a tinderbox of whispers. The scandal of the raid on Mrs. O'Malley's charity was the most delicious piece of gossip to grace the society pages in years, a perfect tragic opera of a high society girl tainted by the criminal world of the man she had married. Liam Doyle, the architect of the lie, was triumphant. He had successfully isolated Cillian, tarnishing the one thing he seemed to care about more than his own empire, his wife's pristine reputation. Doyle waited, confident that his rival, consumed by a rage he could not legally act upon, would soon make a fatal mistake. He had, however, profoundly underestimated the Queen. Genevieve O'Malley did not retreat into a tearful, humiliated seclusion. Instead, she did something so audacious, so contrary to every expectation, that it left the entire city baffled. She announced that the O'Connell Arts Foundation would be hosting an emergency press conference and fundraising luncheon at the Drake Hotel, one of the city's most respectable and glamorous establishments. The stated purpose was to address the recent unfortunate allegations and to reaffirm the Foundation's commitment to the children of the Docklands. It was a declaration of war, a challenge thrown down in the full, unforgiving light of day. To the city's elite, it was a shockingly naive move, a desperate act by a woman who did not understand the rules of the game. To Cillian's rivals, including a smugly confident Liam Doyle who received a personal hand-delivered invitation, it was an invitation to a public execution. They all RSVP'd with gleeful anticipation. The day of the luncheon, the grand ballroom of the Drake was a packed standing-room-only affair. The city's most influential newspaper reporters were there, their pencils sharpened like knives. City aldermen, society matrons, and even the police commissioner had come to witness the spectacle. And scattered amongst them, looking awkwardly out of place in their expensive but ill-fitting suits, were the city's most powerful underworld figures, all drawn by the scent of a rival's blood in the water. Cillian O'Malley arrived first. He was not the brooding gangster of legend. He was the picture of calm, powerful dignity, a man completely at ease in his own skin. He moved through the room, a quiet, formidable presence, his brilliant blue eyes missing nothing. He was not there as a combatant. He was there as a silent, powerful guardian, a king watching over his queen's court. Then, Genevieve arrived. A hush fell over the room. They had expected to see a broken, weeping woman. The woman who entered on her husband's arm was a vision of serene, unshakable confidence. She wore a simple but exquisitely tailored suit of deep, defiant red, her only adornment the magnificent sapphire ring Cillian had given her. She did not look like a victim. She looked like a woman in command. She took her place at the simple podium at the front of the room. Cillian sat in the front row, his expression one of quiet, unwavering support. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming," Genevieve began, her voice calm and clear, resonating through the silent, expectant room. "I know why you are all here. You have read the newspapers. You have heard the whispers. You have come to see the gangster's wife defend herself against accusations of running a criminal enterprise under the guise of charity." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the crowd, landing for a brief, pointed moment on Liam Doyle. "But I am not here today to defend myself. I am here to talk about the nature of business in our great city." She then began to speak, not of her own innocence, but of the city's hidden truths. With a cool, factual precision, she laid out the story of her father's shipping company, of how it had been driven to the brink of ruin by the predatory practices of a larger, more powerful competitor. She did not name the company, but every man of business in the room knew who she was talking about. She spoke of a system where honorable men were crushed by those who valued profit above all else. "My father," she said, her voice full of a quiet, powerful emotion, "was a victim of a certain kind of gangsterism, the kind that is practiced not in back alleys with guns but in boardrooms with contracts, the kind that is perfectly legal and yet profoundly immoral." She then turned her attention to her own work. With a passion that was both genuine and captivating, she spoke of the children of the Docklands, of the families living in desperate poverty, of the need for a different kind of currency in their lives, the currency of hope, of art, of a chance for a better future. She was not defending her charity. She was making the case for its absolute moral necessity. The reporters in the room, who had come for a scandal, were now scribbling furiously, captivated by the story of a woman who was not a criminal, but a true, civic-minded visionary. Finally, she addressed the accusation itself. "It has been alleged," she said, her voice now turning to ice, "that my foundation was a front for a bootlegging operation. This is a vicious lie. But it is not a random one. It is a carefully constructed lie, designed for a specific purpose, by a specific man. She looked directly at Liam Doyle, who now sat frozen at his table, a look of dawning horror on his face. "The anonymous tip that led to the raid on my office," Genevieve announced, her voice ringing with the clarity of a bell, "was made by Mr. Liam Doyle, a senior captain in my husband's organization." A collective gasp went through the room. "Mr. Doyle, however, is not just a concerned citizen," she continued, her gaze unwavering. "He is also a man who has, for the past 6 months, been secretly meeting with the very competitor who sought to destroy my father's company. He has been systematically selling them my husband's shipping routes, his client lists, his most valuable trade secrets. He was not trying to expose a crime. He was orchestrating a corporate takeover, using my good name as his weapon to discredit and displace my husband." She then gestured to the side of the stage. Cillian's man, Leo, stepped forward and began to hand out a series of thin folders to the stunned reporters. Inside were copies of bank statements, of secret meeting schedules, of sworn affidavits from Cillian's informants. It was the irrefutable, meticulously documented proof of Liam Doyle's treachery. The man was ruined. He sat there, utterly exposed, his face a mask of pale, sweaty terror. He had thought he was setting a trap for a naive society girl. He had not realized he was walking into the meticulously prepared courtroom of a brilliant and ruthless queen. Genevieve then delivered the final, killing blow. "It seems," she said, her voice now full of a quiet, sad wisdom, "that there are 2 kinds of gangsters in this city. There are those like my husband, who live by a code, who protect their own, who possess a certain, if unorthodox, honor. And then there are men like Mr. Doyle, men who have no honor. Men who hide their treachery behind a mask of loyalty. Men who are not beasts of honor, but simple common snakes." She paused, letting her words settle over the stunned, silent room. "I will now take your questions." The room erupted into a chaotic frenzy of shouting reporters. The battle was over. Genevieve had not just defended her honor. She had exposed a traitor, solidified her husband's power, and established herself as a formidable, untouchable force in her own right. Cillian remained in the front row, watching his wife command the room. The love in his eyes was mingled with a profound, almost worshipful awe. He had thought he was a king who had found a beautiful queen. He now knew the truth. He was a beast of honor who had, by some miracle, found a brilliant, magnificent, and utterly terrifying lioness. And he had never been prouder. The downfall of Liam Doyle was as swift as it was absolute. The evidence Genevieve had presented was irrefutable, a public execution from which there was no recovery. Doyle vanished from the city's underworld, a disgraced ghost, his name now a cautionary tale whispered in the speakeasies he had once hoped to rule. The message Cillian and Genevieve had sent was clear. Their kingdom was united, their power absolute, and the queen was not a weakness to be exploited, but a formidable force to be feared and respected in her own right. The scandal, which had been designed to destroy them, had instead become the bedrock of their legend. They were no longer just a powerful gangster and his beautiful high society wife. They were the undisputed king and queen of their side of the city, a partnership built on a foundation of fierce loyalty, brilliant strategy, and a love that had proven itself to be unbreakable. In the wake of their victory, a new and profound peace settled over their lives. The constant simmering threat of rivals and betrayals seemed to recede, replaced by a new era of stability. Cillian's empire, now purged of its most cancerous element, was more secure than ever before. This newfound peace allowed them to turn their attention away from the battles of the underworld and towards the quiet, joyful project of building their own world. The grand townhouse on Fifth Avenue, once a cold, gilded cage, was now, finally, a home. The transformation that had begun with Genevieve's arrival was now complete. She filled the silent, formal rooms, not just with flowers and music, but with life. Their home became a surprising, secret salon, a gathering place for the city's most interesting and unconventional souls. On any given evening, one might find a brilliant jazz musician from Harlem, a struggling but talented artist from Greenwich Village, and a world-weary but honorable city councilman, all engaged in a lively, passionate debate in their library. Their shared table a testament to the new, inclusive world Cillian and Genevieve were creating. Their love deepened in this new, peaceful atmosphere. They had been forged in the fire of secrets and danger. Now they were discovering the quiet, profound joy of a simple, shared life. He, the man who had never known a true home, learned the simple comfort of waking up beside the woman he loved, of sharing a quiet breakfast, of reading the morning papers together by the fire. He had spent his life amassing power and wealth, but he now knew that true richness was found in these small, everyday moments of shared intimacy. She, the woman who had sacrificed her own future for her family, now found that future returned to her, more vibrant and more full of purpose than she had ever imagined. She was not just a hostess or a wife. She was Cillian's most trusted advisor, his partner in all things. He brought her into the heart of his legitimate businesses, the shipping lines, the real estate ventures, and her sharp, intuitive mind proved to be an invaluable asset. She saw opportunities he missed. She understood the human element of a business deal in a way his own pragmatic mind often overlooked. They were a perfect team, in the boardroom as much as in the ballroom. Their greatest joint venture, their true legacy, was born from her own past. The charity she had established for the families of the Docklands, the very one Doyle had tried to destroy, now became their shared passion. With Cillian's immense resources and strategic guidance, her small, heartfelt project was transformed into a powerful force for good. They established the Hayes Foundation, a name that honored her family and deliberately kept his own shadowy name separate. The Foundation's mission was to provide not just charity, but opportunity. They built clean, safe, and affordable housing for the dockworkers' families. They established a school for the children, offering them a quality education they could not otherwise afford. And, in a move that was pure Genevieve, they built a beautiful, vibrant community art center, a place where the children could learn to paint, to play music, to dance, a place to nurture their souls as well as their minds. One crisp autumn afternoon, a year after Doyle's fall, Cillian and Genevieve stood on a hill overlooking the newly completed Hayes Community Center. The building was alive with the sound of children's laughter and the faint, happy notes of an out-of-tune piano. "Look at what you have built, my love," Cillian said, his voice a low, reverent murmur as he wrapped his arm around her. "We built it, Cillian," she corrected him softly, her head resting on his shoulder. "I had the dream. You built the foundation." He smiled, a deep, contented expression on his handsome face. "It seems we are good at that, you and I, building things that last." He turned to her, his brilliant blue eyes full of a love that was as steady and as true as the earth beneath their feet. "Our first wedding," he said, "was a contract, a business deal. I believe it is time we had a real one." It was not a surprise proposal, but a quiet, joyful confirmation of the life they had already built. Their wedding took place the following spring. It was not a grand, public spectacle. It was a small, intensely private and beautiful affair, held in the sun-drenched glass conservatory of their Long Island estate, a place Genevieve had filled with a riot of colorful, vibrant flowers. Her family was there, their faces full of a joy so pure it was a benediction. His family was the one they had chosen. Leo, his loyal lieutenant, stood as his best man, and the small, loyal household staff looked on, their faces beaming. Genevieve wore a simple but exquisite gown of ivory lace. Cillian, in a handsome dark suit, looked at his bride with an expression of such profound love and adoration that it silenced the room. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises of a lifetime of partnership, of loyalty, of facing every storm and celebrating every sunrise together. As the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Cillian pulled Genevieve into his arms and kissed her, a deep, loving kiss that sealed not a bargain, but a sacred, unbreakable promise. That evening, They stood on the terrace of their country home, watching as the stars began to appear in the vast twilight sky. The life of the monstrous gangster and the sacrificial society girl was a distant memory. They were simply a husband and a wife, two partners who had, against all odds, found their way to a quiet, profound, and deeply honorable love. Their battles were over, their kingdom was at peace, and their life together, a life of shared purpose and quiet joy, was just beginning. The years that followed their quiet, heartfelt wedding were a testament to the profound and lasting peace they had built together. The name Cillian O'Malley, once a fearsome whisper in the city's underworld, slowly transformed. He never completely abandoned the empire he had built. It was too deeply woven into the fabric of the city. But he changed its nature. Guided by Genevieve's unwavering moral compass and his own deeply ingrained code of honor, his operations shifted further into the light. The speakeasies became legitimate, glamorous nightclubs. The gambling dens were replaced by investments in real estate and shipping, a quiet, ironic echo of the very world her father had lost. He was still a king, but he now reigned over a kingdom of legitimate enterprise. His power derived not from fear, but from a shrewd business acumen that proved to be even more formidable than his former ruthlessness. Genevieve, now the beloved and respected Mrs. O'Malley, became one of New York's most influential, if unconventional, philanthropists. The Hayes Foundation grew into a powerful force for good, its impact felt in every corner of the city's forgotten neighborhoods. She was the quiet, steady heart of their shared legacy, a woman who had turned her own family's salvation into a mission to save thousands of others. Their townhouse, once a cold fortress, was now a true home, filled with the warmth of their love, and 2 years after their wedding, the joyous, chaotic sound of their son, a boy they named Finn, after the brother Genevieve adored. He grew up with his father's brilliant blue eyes and his mother's kind, intelligent heart, a child of two worlds, perfectly at home in both the grand libraries of Fifth Avenue and the vibrant, bustling community centers his mother had built. One cool autumn evening in the late 1930s, nearly a decade after their first fateful meeting, Cillian and Genevieve stood on the terrace of their Long Island estate, the place that was to have been her gilded cage. The house was filled with the sounds of a party, but it was not a gathering of gangsters or socialites. It was a celebration for the families and the children who had benefited from the Hayes Foundation. Cillian, his dark hair now touched with a distinguished silver at the temples, looked out at the happy, laughing crowd on the lawn below. He was no longer the haunted, solitary man she had met in her father's library. He was a man at peace, his face full of a quiet, profound contentment. "It's a different kind of power, isn't it?" Genevieve said softly, her head resting on his shoulder. "It is the only kind that has ever truly mattered," he replied, his arm wrapping securely around her. "I spent the first half of my life building an empire of shadows to protect myself from the world. You, my love, you taught me how to build a kingdom of light, not just for us, but for them." He looked down at his wife, at the woman who had walked into his dark world and had not been afraid. She had been the collateral in a desperate bargain, a prize to be owned. But she had become his partner, his conscience, his greatest treasure. "I came to you a monster, Genevieve, a beast. And you, with your fierce, beautiful, and honorable heart, you taught me how to be a man." She smiled, her love for him a radiant, unwavering light in her eyes. "And I," she said, "came to you a victim, a sacrifice. But you never treated me as one. You saw a queen even when I was just a frightened girl. You gave me a kingdom to rule, Cillian, our kingdom." They stood together, watching as their son, Finn, kicked a soccer ball with the children from the docklands. Their two worlds, once so impossibly far apart, had merged into a single, beautiful reality. Their love story, born in a desperate, dishonorable contract, had been transformed into a legacy of hope, a testament to the fact that even the most monstrous of beasts can be tamed by an honorable heart, and that the most profound love can bloom in the most dangerous of shadows. He leaned down and kissed her, A long, slow kiss that spoke of a lifetime of shared battles, of profound healing, and of a quiet, enduring love. The gangster and the society girl were gone. In their place stood a king and a queen, their reign a testament to the extraordinary power of a love that was brave enough to rewrite its own rules. True honor is not the absence of darkness in our lives, but the code we choose to live by in spite of it. The most powerful kingdoms are not built on fear, but on a foundation of loyalty, respect, and a fierce protection of those we love. Do not be defined by the role the world assigns you. Have the courage to show them who you truly are. A true partnership is not about finding someone who is perfect, but about finding someone who is brave enough to face your monsters with you and to love the beast of honor that lies within.